So yes, Chair, I don't have any apologies for absence.
Any declaration of interest? No. Can we confirm the minute of the meeting held on the 5th November?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Great.
Then, thank you. We'll move on to item 4.
Thank you, Chair, and mindful of what councillors have said about their busy days. We've tried to keep this committee fairly brief on this occasion, mainly really because of obviously we're now starting the process of moving to the new headquarters. So we're trying to make sure that there's enough information for members in terms of the scrutiny of the organisation, but cognizant, of course, there's a big demand on the service to try and move people from one location to the other. First report in terms of agenda item 4 then is your standard human resources update. Tracy will jump in with it if there's any questions that I can't answer from members or that she feels she wants to add some context for you as well. In section 2 we talk about staffing numbers, as you'll know, about where the permanent establishment is, and those are the things where it's the approved establishment, and then of course we talk about the actual establishment and then the variation of that and the reasons for that as well. So you'll see there in terms of whole time we've got an approved establishment of 431, and we're currently within the reporting period up to December slightly above that, and that'll be things like where people have been in the organisation and where we're recruited over and above on the trainees course, because we know people are actually going to retire in the next quarter, for example, and that's all part of the detailed work that comes around the workforce planning. And again, as that gets reviewed and updated, that'll be coming back to members as well. You'll see in things like 2.2 about the activity. So just
Could I just let's go back then? Going back to on the on-call,
yes,
you've got 192 and you've got 241. I thought we were short of on-call. Is that?
Yeah, it's the way that it's reported. So
Okay.
we measure on-call in units, which are 12-hour units of cover.
Okay. Oh right. Okay. Not
rather
people.
than
Not people. Oh right.
So
Okay.
the people is we have 241 people, but they provide units of cover.
Right.
And I think the only thing I would say about the on-call this time is that because we've got 2 stations who are undertaking a trial period with new rostering arrangements, they are counted within the people hours, but not the units for this report. So I don't want to make it too complicated, but I just need to point out that that's the difference this time. So yes, I mean in terms of on-call, we're always seeking to
Yeah.
recruit,
That's what I thought.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
one of the things I want to say on that one, Councillor, if you look at the variance of that, we're actually something like 55 units
Down. Yes. That's,
so we're over 25% short in the on-call system as what we'd approve.
Yeah.
And that, you know, not to be the pessimist, that's probably going to be the trend and maybe even grow nationally around on-call. And there's many reports around that, but in terms of the solution, there are going to be proposals hopefully over the next 12 months we'll bring to members about how we're going to try and deal with that, because that clearly affects availability. So we talk about there about we've still carried on doing recruitment, whole-time recruitment. It will be commencing during this year. Positive action commences around that, on-call recruitment, and there's still a vast amount number in terms of people in support roles that are coming and going. And I know we've said before about pay as being an issue and terms and conditions around making sure that we retain staff as opposed to losing them from the public sector because of pay restraint moving into the private sector. And that does appear to be, some of the reasons that we get fed back to us on things like exit interviews.
Are there other factors at play?
Yes, I think people where there's not enough progression, so support staff where they come in, say, at a particular grade, but there's only, say, 2 or 3 people in the team, but they're very specific needs. So not just, but finance, for example. If the head of finance isn't moving on, there's no vertical progression. So there's some of that horizontal development that we need to think about enriching them so it retains them in the organisation. But of course, once somebody reaches the top of their pay scale, that's kind of it in that grade, unless they take on other duties or they move sideways into something else as part of career development.
I think we talked about this at a meeting before when we were talking about ICT particularly, and one of the challenges within the city council was pay differentials, and one of the most successful things that we'd undertaken was development opportunities, training and skills uplifting that maybe would have cost them significant amounts but were opportunities. So it became quite an incentive
Yeah.
for them to stay for longer, even though they were making maybe 10 grand a year less than in the private sector.
Yeah.
Is there that sort of approach that can be taken
We
in
do
certain
have-
areas?
We do have a skills matrix for support staff about their basic needs that we need them to do the job. And then there's an annual PDR process where people can talk about things they want. We still do offer a bursary process, so things that aren't necessarily in the role,
Yeah.
but might actually enrich the individual.
Yeah.
Then there are those things that we do support. Clearly that has a financial limit of what we can do across the organisation and what we need them to do for the organisation. And there are some things about, I've heard councillors mention, well, we offer pensions and things. I think a lot of people now, pensions aren't particularly that attractive, particularly younger generations, Generation Z as they call it. Pensions are not becoming that much of an attraction to them. And of course, we do have people that come here and move on quite quickly, so they get training from us and then see a role in the private sector for a few more thousand. So they come and get good training from us, but we're not able to retain them and then go on to earn more. So it's a bit of a dilemma for us about what we can do. But of course, we've got national terms and conditions and pay award bodies and those kind of things. So we were having to work within that. But my view is keep them really skilled and maybe they'll stay.
I mean, is there a way with that sort of skills development that maybe beyond what we want them from the job, but is seen as their own personal professional development and having some sort of, golden handlock that they commit to?
Through the bursary process we do.
Yeah.
When people go through the bursary process and they will sign an agreement with us to say that they will stay with us for a certain amount of time or within the public sector, which for a certain amount of time after they qualify.
Right.
So we do that. But the majority of training probably is around people going on courses and accredited courses and seminars and keeping their CPD and their skills up to date. So we invest quite a lot of money in that. Particularly, you mentioned ICT, particularly for ICT.
Right, okay.
We do try to do that because clearly, ICT is changing all the time and we need to make sure that people do have those skills. So yes, we do invest quite a bit of money in that. The other thing we've done, because we do want to be an employee of choice, we do want people to want to come and work for the service. So recently we have updated our sort of benefits package. So this month we've put online a employee benefits portal through an external provider, which we've just sent an email out to employees to say sign up and you'll be able to get discounts and you'll be able to apply for Cycle to Work scheme and you'll be able to access our employment assistance programme. So we're trying to do things in terms of what we can offer, because as we know, pay isn't always the key issue. Sometimes it's about the care that you wrap around people as well and the development that they're given. So we do try and do that, and I think last meeting you approved the agile working policy as well, which again is another which may allow people to work more flexibly. There's all these sorts of things that we do try to keep on top of and maintain that employee of choice, because we know out there it's quite a keen recruitment market. And we have to be able to if we can't always offer the pay, we have to be able to offer the other benefits to make people want to work with us.
Yeah, thanks Tracy. Okay, if we move on for members, if we come down in terms of 2.7 onwards, sickness absence, we spoke last time about having to keep a close eye on the upward trend of sickness absence. I think last week, COVID included, we were around about 8% of the workforce. There's only about 2.5% of that was actually COVID. So for us, still back to pre-COVID levels and slightly higher in terms of non-COVID things. And they are usually quite significant, sometimes broken limbs, waiting for operations, people with long-term illnesses that, either can't get care or their care package means that they're unable to work. So quite a complicated thing. Generally, and musculoskeletal still in the appendices attached to this report gives members a lot more details about the makeup of that in terms of percentages. A lot of care and support wrapped around them through the occupational health provision that we have in the employee assistance programme. And it looks like people are accessing that, on a routine basis. Still a little bit of an issue where some claim that they're unaware of what's available to them. So there's something we need to do around still about the publicising of that, but they're all written to say they're part of the scheme at their homes addresses or their addresses they've registered with us. So we just need to make sure that they are aware that those packages are there, and it'll be something probably that figures with HMI about some of the feedback they had from the staff.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, all this sickness, I mean, I've seen this, short-term sickness, long-term sickness. During this COVID, do the people of the world, do they provide the doctor's sick notes or, report on that or not?
Well, of course, that changed, I think, is now come to an end this week.
Yeah, it depends. If they're isolating and they're being required to isolate, then we don't count that as sickness. It's only if it goes over and above that isolation period and people are off for more than on the 8th day of absence, you are supposed to provide a fit note under the SSP scheme. Recently, the government withdrew that for about 3 or 4 weeks to take some pressure off GP surgeries, I think. So people who would normally get a fit note didn't have to bring one in, but that's yesterday actually that was lifted. So from now on in, people will have to provide a fit note if they have more than 7 days of absence. So we did write out to let people know that that was the case now. But yes, I mean, what we did find, just looking at the figures with regard to COVID, is in that quarter, in quarter 3, the last quarter, COVID accounted for about 34% of the absence. That's going down now. We can see, we do monitor it every week. That is definitely going down. There was a peak when we did lose quite a few staff who were self-isolating. But yeah, we can see that that's coming down now. And just to sort of reiterate what Craig has already said, and the support that we give to staff through our we have a dedicated occupational health team, as you know, so people who are on longer term absences or with mental health issues particularly, we do refer into our occupational health team to get the support that they need. And we've also just recently, in the last week or two, sent out details of what it's called Backup Buddy. It's a mental health app that people can have on their phone or their computer. And basically it's free access to lots of different support for people who may be experiencing those sorts of issues in the early days. So, we are trying to do things preemptively to help people so they don't get to the point where they're actually having to be off work. So our occupational health team work really hard to offer that, and we'll offer things like rehabilitation to people with musculoskeletal injury as well, to get them back into work a little bit quicker if we can. So we do an awful lot of work, particularly I suppose with operational firefighters, in terms of getting people's fitness back to where it should be. We have an employee assistance programme, which is a 24-hour helpline that anybody can ring on any issue at all if they want to do that. We have counselling through Relate that we offer to people, and that's free. We're actually talking to Relate at the moment because we think we're going to offer some in-house such counselling sessions as well over the next few months. So, we're always trying to improve what we're offering to staff. And as Craig says, it is a question of ensuring everybody knows about it and uses it.
So my question about that would be really, I mean, I know we're very supportive of staff and stuff, but unfortunately the numbers are still quite poor. So what do you think? What do you think? Particularly, I'm particularly concerned about whole time and on-call staff numbers. But what further steps do you think are open to us to try and improve that position? I mean, obviously you got to take what's happened over the last couple of years with a pinch of salt. It's been an extraordinary circumstance, but there is a slight trend there which we want to try and address.
Yeah. I think the bit for me is take into account, as you say, it's abnormal time, so what's flushing out of the system. Yeah. I think if I saw some of these as internal injuries, some of them are, but I believe still the vast majority are either illnesses that aren't work-related or injuries that are not work-related. So if they're work-related, we can kind of spot trends in, say, work in practice. Yeah. And through the safety committee we do have the occupational health data that comes from our nurse practitioner. So we're able to look at accidents we have in the workplace that are recorded and what treatments. So in the workplace, we have quite a bit of that. Outside the workplace, we are relying on line managers a lot to try and make sure they do the welfare visits, what's happening in somebody's life, because the employee assistance programme does reach into people having a tough time at the minute. Yeah. So it's not just about supporting them in the workplace, it's about what support can they give them in their life. So I think there is more we can do with that, and certainly with line managers about what they are doing around assessments around the team. One of the throwouts of this for me is that where we've got a vacancy factor in a team, for example, and somebody is sick, what now is the pressure building onto the team as well? So there's something about focusing on the individual is great, but what we're left behind with the team, particularly where they are a small team, and that's particularly where they are potentially a support team out on the stations. You know, there are the more numbers on the stations where we've got in support teams 2 or 3, and if one's off long-term sick, it's adding more pressure onto the team. So I think that's something about line managers keeping an eye on it. And I think what we said at the last committee is it's the next couple of quarters to see what happens, get through the Omicron, through the winter period. I think if we get to summer, I mean, we're always looking at it through occupational health and the HR team and line managers and making sure, well, what are we getting underneath each case? And I think that's what we can do. How much more we can do in terms of actual support, I think, you know, we're always looking at it, but I think we're there or thereabouts really in terms of what an employer can offer and working with the individuals. But it is raising that profile because we've got all these things in place. Do people really know?
Yeah, and I think what you said, and that's quite important. It'd be useful to have that feedback, particularly about the unintended consequences of gaps that then forces pressure onto other people, that then forces pressure into terms of the impact on absence. So trying to understand that would be helpful, and looking over it over the next couple of quarters would, you know, focusing on that would be, I'd be quite interested, because, yeah, setting aside the extraordinary circumstances, you can't do that in its entirety because you don't know how it's impacting on the whole.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and there are some real key places where, you know, where it is a small team. So I don't know, finance or payroll. If the whole team's off, for example, what we're doing about finance and payroll. Where it's things like a dual contract here in an operational sense, where you've got a dual contract watch manager. We've now lost them on the whole time on the ridership, and we've also lost them from the on-call section, where actually supervisory managers on-call sections, you know, are few and far between really. They're not just kind of out there dehydrated where you can, you know, rehydrate them and put another one in. So it's almost like a double whammy for things like a dual contract employee. Because that does affect clients' availability. Places like Southwell, where we do struggle to get supervisory managers, if there's no supervisory manager, there's no fire call in Southwell. You know, that's the reality, and it's coming from Newark and Carlton instead. So that's the kind of impact of some of these things that we do understand, but if members wanted some more detail about that, then we can give a bit of a better breakdown.
I suppose really it's a combination of preventing, so putting as much as we can to prevent the point where people are going off sick or injured, then support when they are, so that we get them back into the workplace as quickly as we can with the support they need, and then managers managing.
Yeah.
So, you know, we do have quite a robust management absence system. You know, every time somebody is off, we have return to work interviews, and we work through that process. So it's a combination really of all those three things.
I mean, it's a tight-knit organisation, it does affect morale a wee bit, doesn't it, if you're working together as a team. But we're above average on all three profiles, aren't we? Quite a bit, you know. Just remind me what the Green Book staff is.
There's your support roles.
They're the support roles, yeah.
So
I just wondered, I was looking at Cumbria as an example, the top in that, and yet in the other ones they're well below average. Any thing to be learned from other organisations of how they manage their sickness?
I think there is, but I think it's looking at the breakdown of what the service looks like as well.
Yeah.
You know, how much do they get exposed to? Some of the figures that they may report, you know, I don't know how local authority or county council, fire authorities report it. So do they report it in the same way, or do they count it in the same as part of the county council, for example? I don't know how they do that kind of particular breakdown.
Yeah, I know there's a particular issue with the figures because some FRS are reporting COVID absence, which we are, and some aren't.
Right, yeah.
So at the point at which...
So it's not like the light, basically?
At the moment, I don't know whether the comparisons are...
Yeah, I think got that from the interview process, the way that some, because some fire authorities are completely within county councils, they run them differently as opposed to a uniform authority like this. So we have to be a little careful, but having said that, still like the numbers to go up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it is something that, you know, I suppose the assurance we can we work really hard to make sure we keep it down, because we know if we lose one, particularly where we're struggling to recruit one, we, you know, the people are so important to us. You know, we need to keep them fit, well, happy wherever we can, and motivated to be at work. But there are some real pressures coming together at the minute. And as I say, notwithstanding it is strange times, the trend isn't, you know, it's not acceptable to us at the minute.
Could I just ask in a general sense, it's not covered in here specifically, but just getting a sense of it, because we're getting feedback in different areas as well. The return to work in a normal environment, are there pressures that we're having to deal with, you know, in the expectation that some people have quite settled into working from home, or splitting their time? Is there any general nervousness about, I'll be quite blunt about this, I'm not totally convinced by the government's stance on the future going forward, you know, those sort of issues.
Yeah.
Are we getting any sense of feedback on that at the moment?
I think the last 2 years there's been a real mix of anxieties, and I think we're still seeing that now. I think some people thinking, you know, I'm perfectly okay at home, leave me alone. And some people really want to get back with the team and socialise, and it's not good for them. So we're certainly getting a sense of that. I think the teams I'm speaking to generally, the managers are doing pretty well with the occupational health support. We're not really getting people, say, might be digging their heels in one way or the other. That we do have a flexible working policy now, so they could homework. We've also now, as Trace said, introduced agile working, which is not home working, but gives them some flexibility about where and when and how they can work. So in terms of a flexible workplace, I think people are seeing that that's okay to do that. I think as well, you know, we're moving to joint headquarters. I'm certainly not getting lots of negative anecdotes. We're getting challenges from the workforce about making sure we communicate with them.
Yeah.
You know, where are we going with this? What does that mean to me? But it, you know, the negatives seem to be few and far between that are coming to me, but what's happening across the team where I can't see those sorts of things. But I don't get a sense that it is, you know, it's any different than it was 12 months ago. And I think if anything, people are just looking forward to it, things getting back to normal, and then see if they can work in a different way. Because we have said to members previously, we need to take the learning over COVID, embed that in the organisation. I think one of my fears is that we were doing in service delivery in terms of the stations, productivity was on the up where we were 3 years ago. And I'm just concerned that COVID and working arrangements might stunt some of that progression and momentum. And that's a conversation I've certainly had with the station-based line management teams about making sure that as restrictions ease, we get people back out in communities, back out doing what we need to do, and then just seeing what that means in terms of workforce. But we do get the odd anecdote in terms of your question, Councillor, where people are concerned. But I think we've tried to keep the line managers really informed along the way. They know occupational health's there to give them some advice. And we have put tailored packages around some individuals that may even have family members with concerns. So they're coming to work thinking they might be putting their family members at risk. So what can we do to assist them? That we still need them to come to work because we're paying them. They're not ill. So how do we kind of deal with that? But they may have somebody at home with a serious condition where them coming to work might put their family at risk. So and we've had that all the way on. We've had tailored risk assessment packages for individuals that are in those cases as well.
Okay.
Okay, I think Councillor picked up around the national trends. I won't go into too much detail. There's national trends that we're not happy with about it. I'd like to think if COVID does us a favour over these next sort of 6 months, that the figures will start looking more realistic about the recording. And I think that might be something just to see with the, whether we contact with the services, what do they record specifically and how, so that we are measuring like for like. It may not change anything, but even some of the terminology in the appendices isn't sort of the same terminology retained on call that members will have seen. So that is something around 214 to 219 that we are trying to work on really, really well. And I think as well as we do joint headquarters, that might affect our non-uniform support staff a lot. Some of those anxieties that people have, making sure we work through that about just the general move. A change programme can be significant to people. Just on the 2.20 around workforce metrics, it talks about there about some of the grievances that we're doing over a period. One disciplinary investigation is commenced, and there's been one dismissal due to capability or ill health. And that really is just to give members some assurance. that is after a long period of time of working with an individual, whatever their circumstances are. It's not just a case of, you know, they can't do the job anymore. That will be over many months, even up to, you know, probably a couple of years, where we'll have been working with them, GP, occupational health, and medical advice from specialists that are supporting them. So that is something that we've had there. 2.22 just highlights there, we did attend a tribunal towards the back end of last year with a previous employee, and at the stage of the employment tribunal we were successful on all the counts that was taken through to the employment tribunal. And they are nervous at times around reputation, and things do get in the press and everything else.
So, was that the one that was in the press?
Yes,
Yeah,
it was in
okay,
the press.
right.
Yeah, so that is something that I guess really we'd never like getting in that position. You know, clearly there's a falling out, and there will be falling out between employees and the employer along the way. It's something we work really hard to try and avoid, but you know, we can't always agree on everything with between two parties. But safe to say, and reassure members on this occasion, you know, it's come down in favour of the service in terms of the practice and approach and how we carried ourselves in the tribunal. And lots of work. I think, you know, you're talking something like 500 pages of evidence pack that will have been put together by staff working really hard, trying to record these things over a couple of year period. And, you know, and that is something that's not lost on me, the work and the pressure that puts on individuals that are going to be under scrutiny outside of the organisation. So, Chair, there's the appendices attached. There's lots of graphs and trends and information. And if there are questions that this prompts from members, please try and get hold of either myself or Leanne or Tracy, indeed, if there's any specific detail you want. But we want to try and bring some of those trends down through 2022.
Just something that needs an eye on, doesn't it?
Yes,
Basically,
Councillor.
you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we do this every 6 months or
Every quarter.
Every
quarter.
What's
every
that?
quarter.
Meeting.
every 8 years,
Yes.
so
Yeah, we make sure we bring this so that members keep a close eye on trends, because it can go up. Well, I'm hoping it goes down, but it can still go up.
So are we happy to note the content of the report?
Could I just so you mentioned about productivity with on the front line and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how you're measuring that or how you want to take that forward, but it would be useful to understand our return to an effective. So maybe that could be rolled into this report, not you know all the time, but on that quarterly basis, just so we got a sense of,
Yeah.
you know, because I think it touches on my concerns, which I think probably shared here, which is obviously returning to normal is a
Yeah.
challenging aspect,
Yeah.
and you're right, getting back out into the communities, doing that sort of work that the service is particularly renowned for,
Yeah.
plus whatever other issues you're using as a measure of productivity. So
Yeah.
maybe if we could pull that out a little bit in terms of moving forward, just so we've got an understanding of it, and
Yeah.
we can share that with people just so that we know.
Well, the data's there because we take it to Community Safety Committee
Yeah.
in terms of the pure metrics, safe and well visits,
Yeah.
fire safety inspections. We could probably map that over the last year or 24 months to see, and
I don't
map
want to
alongside
repeat too
lockdown
much
stuff.
what the
No.
other committees, but
But it might just be useful, even as a one-off, councillor,
Yeah.
we bring it and just say this is kind of what it looks like. Bear in mind, in COVID, they were still doing the high risk. So where a high risk referral came in, where it was about an individual, we may not have been in businesses because the businesses were shut. But in terms of safe and wells, you'll be able to see it go down and then come back up. And bearing in mind, we're on target this year, I think, for something like over 12,000 safe and wells.
yeah.
Right, that's in a COVID disrupted year. Right, we did 3,500 in 2018-19 as a service in a normal, you know, COVID-free year. So,
I think what I want to get for this committee is, because metrics are there, and you're right, in the community safety, I think how it fills our understanding of how the workforce are responding, and how they're sort of sitting comfortably within our return to sort of normal procedures. Don't need all the details of
Yeah.
it, but you know, how's it affecting all the other measures on the HR stuff
Yeah.
that we're concerned about? So it'd be useful just to get a little bit of that, but not we don't need to go through all the numbers
Yeah.
again, but
I suppose it depends how you measure it and what you want to read, but if you looked at COVID impact on our on-call fire appliances, availability went up, and that's because
Yeah.
they went in the... We've come a long way as an organisation on these kind of things, and something I'm kind of super proud of. Some of the conversations we weren't having a decade ago, gender identity, LGBTQ+, and those kind of things, we just weren't even conversations generally in the workforce. And that is something I'm super proud of, and that really underlines for me the cultural shift over that time. We have such a long way to go though, and this is one element really through the Fire Authority that we can really get a statement and give your endorsement to this and support for officers. Lots of energy going in, and what's really good over the last couple of years is the evolution of staff networks. Not only have we got the sort of specialist team in terms of facilitators, but we're now starting to get staff engagement through the networks. And I think that's really key around their voice, making sure, because it'd be great as an officer and a manager just to sort of say this is kind of what we're doing. It's so much more powerful if the workforce are saying it. And this is one way that the Fire Authority and certainly us as a strategic leadership team can show our commitment to the workforce. We've tried to make sure that, as I said in the document, about making sure staff understand it, we're communicating it. A lot of the training that goes around these areas around EDI, I think that's now, they see that as an evolution. It feels like in the past it's been sheep dip everybody, and I think over the coming couple of 3 years we'll start to see that a bit more nuanced and tailored, and hopefully what we're going to see is these things more embedded in everything we do. So if we're doing an incident command for our incident commanders on training on our appliances, starting to embed scenarios where it's not just the, I suppose the stereotype with public like the house fire, it might be things like road traffic collisions where, there's members of the deaf community in it, or there's people in the car that English isn't their first language, and start to embed it there as opposed to they have to go on an EDI training session for the afternoon. And that is something I think about that will demonstrate embedding it, and it will bring these documents to life. The other thing I pull out, Chair, from the report is the EDI review 2.9. We've tried to, over the last couple of 3 years, do a review as against the Local Government Association Equality Framework. That's been really problematic. We've ended up bringing a consultant in that's had a look at the organisation. They've provided us a draft report. That needs to be kind of worked through, and hopefully that will be reported at some point to members, or particularly might even be the Strategic Inclusion Board after the rising of one of the fire authorities. And that is something that has really found is the draft. We've now got to sit and go through it and understand it, and what does that mean in terms of actions and everything else. But that's been a really useful exercise. That's engaged managers, management forums, it's spoken to staff on stations, virtually, and everything else. So the consultant's been able to go and speak to people about what EDI looks like in this organisation, or more importantly, what are they saying about the culture of the organisation, both how it's led and how we operate. So the other thing I'd say, Chair, is appendices A and B attached is the equality and diversity inclusion, our commitment, which is laid out there. There are some hyperlinks in the document, if you view it online, that are attached that you can go and that provides more information to members if you so wish. And then Appendix B around sexual orientation and gender identity equality, which is attached there. So really big, powerful statements. Something that I am incredibly passionate about. We've been through lots of things as a strategic leadership team, both in terms of dealing with consultants, staff forums, reverse mentoring. So we've been trying to make sure that senior leaders are listening to people from underrepresented groups about how does it feel to be them in this organisation, how tolerant are we of difference, if we are or we are not, and can somebody bring their true self to this organisation? Because that is the key for me. It's about if somebody can be themselves at work, they're the best at work, and the authority gets the most out of them. So I'd just really commend them both, really, Chair, to the committee.
Yeah. Question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I read the report. From the BAME community, there are still not many in the staff, underrepresented. Is the service, fire and rescue services, are they having an appropriate advertisement for them to join?
I think what you're going to see over this, you're going to get your new CRMP come into Fire Authority. There's certainly a commitment in there about making sure that we understand communities, which we try to do now. We need to balance between where we see risk, which is our job to deal with risk, and where that risk is in communities. And there are some communities, I feel, that we still don't know very well. So there's something around the CRMP about making the statement, but then what do we do internally about that? We do have a community engagement plan. At the moment, we have a community engagement officer. We have somebody that is doing positive action around the whole time recruitment, but we need to embed that. It can't just be seen as something we do up to recruitment, positive action. And there is something that I've been trying to make sure that we improve over the last 3 years in service delivery about how we integrate EDI into everything we do. So a firefighter goes and does a safe and well visit, and it's a single parent. Have they ever thought about being a firefighter, positive action, because they may be from an underrepresented group? So there is something, again, as I said earlier, about embedding it in all that we do. So there is something there. There is something that I'm certainly looking to us to work on at the minute about how do we substantiate some of those resources, because some of those resources are temporary resources. And that, again, maybe we're having to make some changes to the permanent establishment, for example, over the next year, to make sure we can embed that work. So yes, there is that work ongoing. Is it where we need it to be at the minute? No, it is not. The issue, you quite rightly say, if you look at the metrics, at the moment at station managers, so if I pick a uniform thing because they're easily identifiable, I don't have a woman as a station manager currently at the moment. I do have somebody from a BME community background at the minute, but temporary at the moment. But there's no others that are really coming forward, because we've got the entry schemes we've got the pathways we've got. And of course, if you're not recruiting people into your organisation, so then you've got a real issue. So we need to work on the positive action a lot more, and we need to try and make the most of that. What I would sort of say about the promising side of it, the last trainee programme we had, I think we had something like 25% were identified as being female as the successful trainees, and I think about 27%, something like that, around BME community. So the product that was coming out about the effort was putting in was great, but we can't do it just when we're recruiting, because we lose all that period in between about raising the profile with communities. This could be an employer of choice, this could be a career for them. So it is really an ongoing thing, but I think we've still got some work to do about embedding things, but we're going to have to look at the structure of the organisation to allow us to do that.
Thank you.
And if I can add something there too. I had a meeting with the engagement officer, and she's really ready to do things in the communities and the wards, and she's ready to liaise with councillors. And if you want to run an event in your ward or something, she's ready to do that. And by doing that, she's spreading the things about authority and all that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that's absolutely right, Chair. What I would sort of say that's an individual. I'm looking for the workforce to take it on as part of their job. It can't be left to one individual. What we can have in that role is coordinating the ask across teams.
Well, what this paper does, Craig, is it gives people the opportunity and what's the word I'm looking for? Positivity that in recruitment that you're very an open organisation to receive people from any background and welcome them into this organisation.
Yeah.
And I think that gives them confidence, that's what I was looking for, that they can apply for a job within this organisation because of the measures you're taking and the policies you're taking.
Yeah, and I think as a workforce, it's very much a changing journey. As I said earlier, the culture of this fire and rescue service is very different from when I joined. Everybody looked like me when I joined. Society doesn't look like me, so why should the fire and rescue service look like me? There is a balance between those that are in the organisation and there'll be people that say, we just need to recruit the best people. Right, okay, I absolutely agree with that, because that's what the public deserve. But we have to put efforts in to make sure people understand it can be a job for them, it can be a career.
That's right, they don't realise.
Yeah, and I think sometimes as well, when you're talking about minority representation, the majority start to feel that they're a little worth a bit less because they feel like they're being undermined. And I think we just need to make sure we keep that conversation going, saying that's not what's meant here at all. What's meant here is about being open to everybody, so that everybody knows it's a good job. Because most people that come into this job, from what I can see, whether it's uniformed or non-uniformed, love this organisation. Go back to why people are leaving earlier. A lot of people would love to stay, but because of cost pressures, need to go and get a job that pays more. It's not because they don't like the organisation. So we're a good organisation to work for, and I think what we're talking about here is, you know, we've got another recruitment for a whole time coming over the next 12 months. We can optimise that as well, so that we begin to show that. And some other adjustments in other teams like training centre. You know, we've started making adjustments in what the training centre staff, you know, what it physically looks like and what they contribute because of difference.
Thank
I welcome this. Just very supportive of it. I think we're taking the right direction, right route of travel. I think particular focus on underrepresented groups is important. I just want to throw something else in here. I don't want to sound like I've just discovered this, but it's just that over the last few months there's been a bit of I've been doing a lot of work around issues around neurodivergency and issues around additional challenges, dyslexia, the ability to read and write, and it was a constituent who brought up about the CRMP, and they wanted to engage with it, but they couldn't because they couldn't read, and they were really struggling with it. But I'm thinking that in terms of as an employer, listening to people's experiences around this, that you know there is potential in people, but they struggle with some what we consider basic skills, but actually are particular challenges. So at some point in the future, I'd like us to look at that in terms of what we do to support staff, because the other thing is quite a lot of these are hidden, and some people maybe don't go as far as they could do because they don't want to address the concerns they've got, and we might not be picking it up. And also in terms of recruitment going forward, you know, underrepresented groups have great deals of potential as employees, but maybe don't come forward because of issues that they consider hold them back. So I'd like to explore that in a more explicit sense going forward. I don't mean now, but I think we've got a really good statements here. I think we might need to be a bit more explicit about that support as an employer and as a community engaged organisation with those particular issues going forward, because I don't see them explicitly mentioned. And actually my experiences, and as I say, I don't want to sound like an idiot because I've only just discovered this, it's been at the back of my mind, but it's just I've had a few bits of casework recently about it, and it's just brought it to the forefront. That actually maybe I need to think about how I engage with people differently, and maybe we should start exploring that in some sense as an organisation.
I suppose where we are at the minute about staff networks, it's in its infancy, but there is Disability Neurodiversity Network. So that's in its infancy, but hopefully that will, and that has got a strategic leadership team champion who's got lots of empathies around those kind of issues. We do have, in terms of like things where it has become more commonplace for people to identify that they've got a concern or a need, but they've never had any assessment. So we do have some people that have had assessments actually have now worked out, actually, I've got a form of dyslexia. And they've been in the fire service some time, but might be wondering why did I find that a little bit more difficult, or a little bit more, or what did I have to do? And we've had some people actually step up in terms of blogs and things who have actually sort of stepped forward and said, look, I've got, and this is how I deal with it, and this is what the organisation's done. And then we've got things like the read and write software as well.
So okay, that sounds great. Chair, would you mind if we sort of explored this at a future meeting?
That's what
I've got some notes.
Note it down,
it is something that I suppose it's, when it was like Disability Discrimination Act, it was all, everybody had got this view about it. It was all about the wheelchair user.
Exactly.
You know, kind of the world's moved on. You know, millenniums since that view. Those unseen things that people sometimes find it very difficult to step forward. But I think the culture now is very, very different. And I say we have some, you know, some very regarded individuals in the organisation that have stood up and said, you know, look, you know, this has been my experience. And it has been those people that drove things like getting read and write on the computer systems, so that it does allow them to do that, and the assessments with the line managers around their particular needs. But we'll certainly bring more detail back, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you.
So any other questions? So are we happy to support the endorsement of the two? We're happy.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll move on to item 6.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, well, this one we said we'd bring a further update report around the apprenticeship levy. Done really well on this one. Again, won't go into too much detail. So since 2019, we've currently got 20, and we've got 27 people on as apprenticeship firefighters. There are other opportunities that you'll see in 2.7 around apprenticeships within the organisation, and that is going back to members said about the HR update earlier. Apprenticeships are probably one way of bringing the skill in and having it graded to having apprenticeships in, and that way, of course, we get predominantly younger people. Just pause there, Chair. That's going down.
I think that's okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. So apprenticeships we are seeing as one way of attracting people into the organisation and give them the skills and then career grading them, and hopefully maybe at the end of it there is a role for them beyond their apprenticeship, but that's the way somebody gets to know the knowledge and understanding of the organisation very intrinsically as the individual. So firefighter apprenticeships, what I would sort of say though, and the paper alludes to that, is that this is whole-time apprenticeships. The commitment on doing an apprenticeship and training and things, if you were on call, we've actually took the decision at the moment in the last year that we're not going to go there yet. There is a couple of other fire and rescue services with large numbers of on-call that are beginning to offer it and see it through, and I think we just need to see the impact of that in terms of the on-call. But I say really good progress that we're making, and of course as all public bodies you're levied. So if you don't draw down on the levy, you're sending government money back that you get in your revenue support grant, you're sending it back and not drawing it down. So it feels a little bit, you know, the incentive is, well, do something about it. And I think that was government's view, you know, try and get skills in the workplace up and running. And this is one way of either being punitive to you or giving you an incentive. Thankfully, I think we're drawing down more than, as it talks about in the financial implications. They get an endpoint assessment when they get to the end of their period, and what's really good is that we've got people that are passing, you know, everybody's passing, including one with a distinction, and of course now that is kind of moving on, each individual gets drawn down £14,000, so it's not small numbers when you look at the total salary of a firefighter. So starting salary, you know, it's more than half of their starting salary, so there is a real incentive for us to do that. But of course, if we're not running whole-time recruitment campaigns and the apprenticeship levy carries on, I can't remember the actual date when it was supposed to come to an end, but if it carries on and we're not recruiting, then there's a disincentive there, but of course we can't give people jobs that we don't have. And it just, as I said there, talks about in 2.7, not forgetting we are a uniformed and non-uniformed service as kind of one body, and it talks about there about predominantly ICT, Prevention Protection Department and corporate communication. So we are trying to make sure that managers access this, and I think if they are struggling to advertise and recruit a post, I think there'll be an encouragement if that carries on to start looking at apprenticeships, get somebody in that actually can start learning the skills and applying the trade on behalf of the authority. It does talk, I say there, about the target in 2.10, target of 2.3 of the organisation are to be on apprenticeship new starters. It would require 20 new apprentices each year. Well, some years we can do that if we have the right numbers of people coming in. There'll be a lot of years it just wouldn't work for us. So we just need to see how that plays through. As I say, in financial implications in section 3, has drawn down 181,000 and paid at 126,000 in apprenticeship levy. So the figures read good for this report. And that's probably what I'd sort of say, Chair, really, on that one. It's a good news story. I would go back, we reported previously that we had an Ofsted, because Ofsted oversee apprenticeships, and we had a really good, it was our initial, how's it going, and we had a really strong report about how it was being embedded. They commented not only about their initial induction and training, but the support they had in the workplace, but as the organisation, including strategically how it was supporting the apprenticeship approach. So good news story in the main. I think it is something around while ever apprenticeship levy carries on we should do, and I think even when it's gone we should make sure that we see apprenticeships as an avenue as well, because I'd like to think that it's predominantly local community members that are accessing apprenticeships, so if we're paying people in the community, they're spending the money in the community, so it's good for the county and the city.
What age group are you aiming at, and what recruitment do you do?
We don't have an age you
No,
know,
so,
at
yeah,
all.
okay.
So yes, certainly with whole-time firefighters, there's a whole range of
Yeah.
different ages.
So apprenticeship could be old,
And it's-
as open to a
Yeah, I mean, the
wide range.
apprenticeship for whole-time firefighters is more about the standard of the training people are given. So we recruit on the basis that, you know, we have an open recruitment campaign and we might have 400 or 500 people who apply to it. Whereas the support roles are obviously much more targeted, and we do tend to get younger people, probably just coming out of the school or A-levels or something like that, who come into those roles, and then we give them the formal training to become vocationally qualified. So it's a little bit different in terms of the whole time scheme and the support roles, a little bit different the way we do it. The whole time scheme runs for about 26 months, so at the end of that, you do your endpoint assessment, as Craig has said, and you become a competent firefighter, and you step into role. The support roles are usually about 2 years while people become qualified, and whilst we hope that we can keep them on in some way, that's not always a guarantee at the beginning. We don't know if we can, or because, you know, we're quite a small organisation, really. But we do, and I think we've said in 2.9, you know, 2 former apprentices have taken up substantive roles in our finance department over the last year. So that's really good to see. It's really good to get people in, you know, from school or at age 18 or whatever, and then see them going for a substantive role, and that's a really good thing to you know, to see them develop.
And you're filling all the apprenticeship roles, opportunities you have?
Yeah, we have no. Yeah, we've. I think the most recent one was in our comms team. So we've taken on an apprentice designer to help us with that side of the comms. So you know, they're sort of all over the organisation. We've had somebody who came through as a fitness instructor and qualified, and we've been a fixed term contract, and you know, there's been all sorts of different roles that people have done. At the moment, we have 5. We are encouraging managers where they do have a vacancy at a sort of base entry level to think about apprenticeships when they're appointing to it, so that, you know, we can nurture people into the organisation.
And the challenge is to keep them in the organisation.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, where there's an opportunity for them to stay with us. Yeah.
So, good stuff in here and everything. Just want to ask, so in section 5, 18% women, 26% BAME. The BAME numbers sound about right in terms of representation. That's quite a low number for women. Is that any... Sorry, yeah, is that... I don't... taking those figures as a bald numbers, so is there any background to that or anything that we should understand?
I think that's primarily because of whole-time recruitment. So
Right.
I think half and half of our Green Book staff are women, between women and men.
Yeah,
But when we come to whole-time recruitment, then we tend to get more men than women
yeah.
who come through that process. So I think that's where...
So that's a known problem anyway.
Yeah,
One we
that's
should
an
be...
issue of attracting more women into
Yes,
the
yeah.
fire service itself, and people from their backgrounds, encourage them into the service, take an interest, come on one of our entry days, come and have a go.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
we do try to do that, but I think that reflects that.
Yeah, so understanding that in that context, that's a discussion that we've already had and need to address. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we had that discussion last meeting.
Yes, yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, I just wanted to understand, you know, because they're quite bold figures there, and it's just understanding the context.
Any more questions?
No.
So we're happy to recognize the progress made in the employment of the apprenticeship role during the review period. Are we happy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
What we probably might do, Chair, next time, depending on how much detail we've got, is we might bring that back in just the HR update report, depending on how much detail and how much scrutiny members would want. Just for the sake, it is a fairly light report with some of the metrics are quite thinking it might be something we can just wrap into rather than separate reports. But we'll take some steer on that later, maybe.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Item 7, exclusion of the public. To consider excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the remaining items in accordance with Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under the Schedule 12A, Part 1, Paragraph 1 and 3. On the basis of that, having regard to all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing